The child sat by her father's grave at dawn, whispering a wish that would change a millionaire's life forever. The dawn painted the sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold as 8-year-old Emily Anderson knelt beside her father's gravestone. Her small fingers traced the engraved letters, worn smooth by her daily visits. The morning dew soaked through her threadbare jeans, but she didn't mind. This was their special time. "Daddy," she whispered, her breath visible in the crisp morning air, "Mummy's getting worse." The hospital bills, her voice cracked as she placed a crumpled newspaper earned dollar bill beneath a small rock. "I'm trying my best, but it's not enough." Unknown to Emily, William Crawford stood frozen behind a nearby oak tree. The billionaire CEO had come to visit his daughter's grave, only to witness this intimate moment. The child's words echoed his own daughter's last wish before the accident. "Daddy, promise you'll help others when I'm gone." His hands trembled as he watched the little girl bow her head in prayer. In the heart of Boston's working-class district, Sarah and Emily Anderson's small apartment told a story of quiet desperation. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the single bedroom they shared held 2 narrow beds separated by a nightstand picked up from a neighbor's yard sale. Every morning, Emily would wake before sunrise to help her mother, whose trembling hands could no longer button her own shirt without assistance. Sarah Anderson, once a respected financial analyst, now struggled through each day battling stage 4 cancer and the crushing weight of false accusations. 3 years ago, she had been wrongfully terminated from Crawford Technologies, branded a thief, and blacklisted from the financial industry. The embezzlement charges, though later dropped for lack of evidence, had left an indelible mark on her reputation. No company would risk hiring the Crawford embezzler, as the newspapers had dubbed her. At school, Emily faced her own daily battles. The whispers followed her through the hallways of Boston Elementary. That's the thief's daughter. Lunch hours found her hiding in the library, pretending to read while eating the meager sandwiches she'd prepared herself. Her once pristine school uniform, now faded and mended multiple times, became another source of ridicule. Yet she held her head high, remembering her mother's words, "Our dignity is something they can't take from us." The 8-year-old had taken on responsibilities far beyond her years. Before school, she would deliver newspapers in their neighborhood, her small hands turning blue in the winter cold. After school, she'd help elderly Mrs. Thompson with her groceries for a few extra dollars, then rush home to prepare dinner before her mother returned from her night shift cleaning offices. The sight of her mother's fashionable business suits, now hanging like ghosts in their closet, served as a constant reminder of their fall from grace. And their neighbors, once friendly faces who'd attended their summer barbecues, now crossed the street to avoid conversation. The community that had once embraced them had turned its back, fear of association stronger than years of friendship. Only old Mrs. Thompson, herself a widow surviving on Social Security, occasionally slipped Emily extra groceries, pretending she couldn't eat them all herself. Sarah's medical bills piled up on their kitchen table like fallen autumn leaves, each one a reminder of their precarious situation. The experimental treatment that might save her life remained tantalizingly out of reach, its 6-figure price tag more than they could earn in a decade. Emily had secretly started a mom's medicine jar, dropping in every penny she earned, though the few dollars it contained seemed to mock her efforts. At night, when Sarah thought Emily was asleep, she would sit by their window, silently wiping away tears as she wrote letters for her daughter's future birthdays, graduation, wedding day events she feared she wouldn't live to see. Emily would watch through half-closed eyes, her own pillow wet with tears she refused to let her mother see, determined to be strong for them both. Their story spread through Boston's elite circles as a cautionary tale of disgrace, but few knew the daily acts of love and courage that played out behind their apartment's thin walls. Emily still kept her mother's old business awards in a shoebox under her bed, believing that someday someone would realize the truth and restore their family's honor. Until then, she held on to her father's last words, "Take care of your mother, little bird." Sometimes the world is harsh, but love always finds a way. William Crawford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city lights flicker beneath the gathering dusk. At 55, he was one of Boston's most powerful men, yet the reflection staring back at him showed only a hollow shell of his former self. 5 years had passed since the accident that took his daughter Catherine, but time hadn't dulled the pain, it had only taught him to hide it better. His corner office at Crawford Technologies, once a symbol of his success, had become a self-imposed prison. Family photos had long been removed, except for one hidden in his desk drawer. Catherine, on her last birthday, her 16-year-old smile forever frozen in time. The daughter who'd once filled these halls with laughter, doing her homework in the conference room and bringing cookies to the security guards, was now only a ghost in his memories. The empire he'd built seemed meaningless now. Crawford Technologies' stock price might be soaring, but William measured his days in losses: 1,825 days without hearing Catherine's laugh, 1,825 mornings waking up to an empty house, 1,825 nights haunted by the same question: could he have prevented it? His brother Robert, the company's CFO, called his grief unseemly for a man of his position. The board members whispered about his emotional stability, yet none of them understood that success meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. His marriage hadn't survived the loss. Diana, his ex-wife, had moved to Europe, unable to bear the sight of the city where their daughter had died. The divorce papers had cited irreconcilable differences. But the truth was simpler and more brutal. They couldn't save each other from drowning in grief. Their shared pain had become a wall between them, each reminder of Catherine another brick in its construction. The recent corporate downsizing had been Robert's idea, streamlining operations he'd called it. William had signed the termination papers without reading them, trusting his brother's judgment while lost in his own fog of grief. Now, those decisions were coming back to haunt him. Each night he found himself scanning through personnel files, faces and names blurring together, wondering how many lives he'd carelessly impacted. His massive Tudor mansion in Beacon Hill stood as empty as his heart, its rooms cleaned by staff he rarely saw, meals prepared by chefs he never thanked. The only room he couldn't bear to enter was Catherine's, preserved exactly as she'd left it, that fatal morning math homework unfinished on the desk, college brochures scattered across the bed, and her diary lying innocently on the nightstand, its secrets still unread. The corporate world saw William Crawford as a titan of industry, a man who'd built a technology empire from the ground up. Forbes called him Boston's digital king, but alone in his office, long after his employees had gone home, he was just a father who couldn't save his daughter. The charity galas and board meetings that filled his calendar were poor substitutes for family dinners and weekend movies with Catherine. His brother Robert kept pushing him to move on, to consider retirement and let younger blood take the reins. But William knew the truth: work was all he had left. Without it, he'd have to face the silence, the emptiness, and the weight of all his regrets. So he buried himself in acquisitions and mergers, using corporate success to mask personal failure, all while Catherine's last words echoed in his dreams: "Promise you'll help others when I'm gone, Daddy." That promise, still unfulfilled, was the heaviest burden he carried. The threads connecting the Andersons and the Crawfords ran deeper than anyone knew. 3 years ago, Sarah Anderson had been more than just another employee. At Crawford Technologies, she had been the whistleblower who discovered financial irregularities in the company's Asian division. Her meticulous reports, filed through proper channels, had never reached William Crawford's desk. Instead, they had landed in Robert Crawford's hands, triggering a chain of events that would destroy one family and unknowingly wound another. Robert had moved swiftly, orchestrating an elaborate scheme to discredit Sarah before she could expose his illegal activities. The evidence he fabricated was flawless doctored bank statements, forged signatures, and manufactured security footage showing Sarah accessing restricted areas after hours. The embezzlement charges against her had seemed ironclad, and the media had feasted on the story of a trusted employee betraying a grieving CEO. But there was another connection, one buried in Catherine Crawford's unread diary. 2 months before her death, Catherine had befriended a lonely girl at her volunteer program at the local library, Emily Anderson. The two had formed an unlikely bond, sharing stories and dreams among the dusty shelves. Catherine had written about the little girl whose mother worked at her father's company, whose determination to help her family had touched her heart. She'd even convinced her father to donate anonymously to the library's after-school program, ensuring Emily would always have a safe place to study. The day of Catherine's accident, she had been on her way to meet Emily at the library. The diary entry from that morning read, "Dad seems so lost lately. Maybe helping Emily's family could give him purpose again. I'm going to talk to him about it today." That conversation never happened, and the diary remained unopened in her room, its pages holding truths that could have changed everything. The community's reaction to Sarah's alleged crime had been swift and merciless. Former friends became accusers, neighbors became strangers, and doors that had once been open slammed shut. The local parish, where Sarah had volunteered for years, quietly removed her name from their helper lists. The PTA, which she had once chaired, asked her to step down. For the good of the school, the isolation was complete and crushing. Only Mrs. Thompson, who had known Sarah since she was a child, stood firmly by the Andersons. She had witnessed Sarah's integrity firsthand over decades and refused to believe the accusations. But in the face of overwhelming public opinion and media condemnation, her lone voice of support seemed to echo in a void. The elderly widow had watched helplessly as her young neighbors' lives unraveled, able to offer little more than sympathy and the occasional home-cooked meal. The truth of Sarah's innocence lay buried in encrypted files on Robert Crawford's private server, alongside evidence of his own extensive fraud. Each day he walked the corporate halls as a respected executive, while Sarah scrubbed those same floors at night, their paths crossing without recognition in the stark difference between day and night shifts. The irony was lost on no one except those who could have changed it. The morning Emily found her mother unconscious on the bathroom floor changed everything. Sarah's stockpile of generic pain medications lay scattered across the cold tiles, an empty bottle clutched in her lifeless hand. The sight burned itself into Emily's 8-year-old memory, her mother's usually neat hair splayed across the floor, her work uniform still crisp despite her crumpled form, and a tear-stained note that began, "My dearest Emily, please forgive me." The next hours passed in a blur of sirens, harsh hospital lights, and pitying glances from medical staff. Emily sat alone in the sterile waiting room, her small frame drowning in an adult-sized chair, clutching her mother's purse like a lifeline. The emergency room nurse had tried to contact their listed family members, only to be met with curt refusals and disconnected calls. "We don't associate with thieves," Emily heard one relative say through the phone's tinny speaker. When Sarah regained consciousness, the hospital's response was swift but cruel. Without insurance, and with outstanding bills from her cancer treatments, they could only hold her for the legally required 24 hours. The attending physician, Dr. Martinez, fought to extend her stay, arguing for psychiatric observation, but hospital administration remained unmoved. "We're running a hospital, not a charity," the administrator had said, loud enough for Emily to hear through the thin door. The local news picked up the story, not out of compassion but sensation. Disgraced Crawford executive attempts suicide ran as a sidebar in the Boston Herald, reducing Sarah's despair to a footnote in her own scandal. Online comments ranged from mockery to outright celebration, with some suggesting she should have finished the job to spare taxpayers the burden of her care. Emily, searching for information about her mother's condition, found these comments late at night on the library computer, each word a fresh wound to her young heart. School became impossible. News of Sarah's suicide attempt spread through the hallways like wildfire, transforming typical childhood teasing into something darker. Emily's teacher found her hiding in the supply closet during lunch, having retreated there after classmates left printouts of the news articles on her desk. The school counselor suggested she take some time off to process, a gentle euphemism for what amounted to forced isolation. Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor, became their sole lifeline. She took Emily in during Sarah's brief hospital stay, her social security check stretched even thinner to feed an extra mouth. The old woman's arthritis gnarled hands prepared comfort food from her own childhood: meatloaf and mashed potatoes, chicken soup, with homemade noodles attempting to nourish not just Emily's body but her battered spirit. The hospital bills from the suicide attempt added another mountain to their existing financial avalanche. Sarah, still weak but driven by necessity, returned to work just 3 days later. Emily would watch her mother apply concealer to dark circles each morning, hands trembling as she pinned on her cleaning service name tag, the same hands that had once confidently presented financial projections in Crawford Technologies' boardroom. The final blow came when Child Protective Services arrived for a routine wellness check. The social worker, though kind, made it clear that Sarah's attempt and their financial situation had raised red flags. Emily listened from her bedroom as the woman discussed temporary placement options and the child's best interests, each phrase striking terror into her heart. That night, she made a decision that would change everything. She would leave school entirely to work full-time, consequences be damned. Sarah found Emily's withdrawal paperwork hidden under her mattress the next morning. The sight of her daughter's careful signature on the forms, clearly practiced to look adult, broke something in her that even the suicide attempt hadn't touched. She watched Emily sleeping, small hands still stained with newspaper ink from her morning route, and made her own decision. She would fight not just for herself but for the little girl who deserved so much more than a mother who tried to leave her behind. William Crawford's investigation began the morning after he overheard Emily's prayer, though he hadn't meant to start one at all. A simple background check on Sarah Anderson had cascaded into something far more disturbing. Sitting in his home office, surrounded by stacks of personnel files and financial reports, he felt the first stirrings of doubt about the empire he'd built. The official record painted Sarah Anderson as a skilled manipulator who had embezzled millions through a complex scheme of false accounts. Yet inconsistencies nagged at him. The timing of her termination coincided perfectly with a major audit of their Asian operations. The evidence had appeared almost too conveniently, and her spotless decade-long employment record contradicted the portrait of a master fraudster. His first red flag came from the company's internal security logs. The timestamps showing Sarah accessing restricted servers occurred while she was documented giving a presentation to the entire financial department. When he questioned his head of security about this discrepancy, the man grew nervous, eventually admitting that Robert Crawford had personally ordered those logs modified. Robert's reaction to William's subtle inquiries proved telling. Why dig up old scandals his brother had snapped during their weekly dinner? The woman's guilty. The matter's settled. But William noticed how Robert's hands shook as he reached for his wine glass, how his eyes darted away when questioned about specific details of the investigation. Digging deeper, William discovered that every person involved in Sarah's termination had been either promoted or given substantial bonuses in the months following her departure. The audit team that had discovered her alleged fraud had all moved to positions in Robert's division, their salaries nearly doubled. The pattern was too neat, too convenient. The most damning evidence came from Sarah's original reports, the ones that should have reached his desk but never did. Hidden in the company's archive servers, encrypted under multiple layers of security, William found detailed documentation of financial irregularities in their Asian operations. Every transaction she'd flagged matched perfectly with the mysterious shortfalls that had been puzzling their current auditors. Late one night, as William pieced together the real story, his brother's secretary appeared at his door. Agnes, who had served the company for 30 years, handed him a USB drive with trembling hands. "I should have done this years ago," she whispered. "But Mr. Robert." He threatened by grandson's college fund. The drive contained copies of emails between Robert and various conspirators, outlining their plan to destroy Sarah's credibility before she could expose their scheme. The truth hit William like a physical blow. While he had been lost in grief over Catherine, his own brother had orchestrated the destruction of an innocent woman's life. The same brother who had urged him to move on, who had handled all the unpleasant details of running the company, had been systematically looting it while framing others for his crimes. William's hands shook as he reviewed Sarah's current situation, a single mother battling cancer, working as a night cleaner in the very building where she'd once been a respected analyst. Her daughter, the same age Catherine had been when she first dreamed of helping others, selling newspapers before dawn to buy her mother's medications. The weight of his negligence, his failure to protect his employees while lost in personal grief, felt crushing. But it was the final piece of evidence that broke him completely. In a forgotten email thread, Robert discussed Emily Anderson. Specifically, the kid could be a problem. She's too smart, asks too many questions. Might need to arrange an accident if she starts digging. The casual cruelty of threatening a child, of plotting to silence a family completely, revealed a monster wearing his brother's face. William's first anonymous intervention came through the hospital. A private foundation newly created and registered in Delaware paid off all of Sarah's outstanding medical bills. The hospital administrator, who had been so cold, suddenly became remarkably accommodating, offering access to experimental treatments and private rooms. The foundation's paperwork, handled through layers of lawyers and trusts, was impeccable, leaving no trace back to William Crawford. Emily noticed the changes first. The aggressive collection calls stopped. Her mother's prescriptions, previously rationed like precious gems, were now filled without question. The same pharmacy that had once refused them credit now offered home delivery. When Sarah tried to inquire about the foundation, she hit wall after wall of polite but firm private bankers who would only say her case met their funding criteria. The community's reaction to this mysterious benefactor ranged from suspicious to hostile. Rumors spread that Sarah had found another mark, that she was blackmailing someone powerful. The local paper ran a snide piece questioning the convenient timing of this financial rescue, suggesting investigations into her alleged fraud should be reopened. Former friends who had abandoned them now returned, curious about the source of their apparent salvation. William watched from afar as his intervention rippled through their lives. He arranged everything through intermediaries, each helper bound by strict confidentiality agreements. A scholarship foundation contacted Emily's school about their gifted student program, covering her educational expenses. An anonymous donor provided gift cards to local grocery stores. A medical transport service appeared to take Sarah to her treatments. But William's careful plans hit an unexpected obstacle: Sarah's pride. She refused several of the offered services, insisting on working despite her condition. Emily found her mother crying over the foundation's letters late one night, torn between desperate need and fear of accepting help that might be withdrawn as suddenly as it appeared. "We've learned the hard way, haven't we, sweetheart?" Sarah had whispered, holding Emily close. "If something seems too good to be true." The neighborhood watched this drama unfold with mixed reactions. Mrs. Thompson alone seemed genuinely relieved, though she harbored suspicions about the benefactor's identity. She'd noticed the expensive black car that sometimes parked at the cemetery entrance during Emily's morning visits, had seen the distinguished-looking man who watched from a distance with red-rimmed eyes. Sarah's cancer treatments began showing promising results, but each piece of good news came with a shadow of anxiety. She couldn't shake the feeling that accepting this help might lead to another devastating fall. During her night shifts at Crawford Technologies, she would pause sometimes, looking up at the executive floors where she once worked, wondering if her guardian angel might be closer than she imagined. Emily, however, bloomed under the reduced pressure. With basic needs met, her natural intelligence and resilience shone through. Her teachers noted improved concentration, better grades, a return of the spark that hardship had nearly extinguished. She still visited her father's grave each morning, but now her prayers included thanks for their mysterious helper. Despite the anonymous foundation's support, Sarah's condition took a devastating turn in early winter. The experimental treatment that had shown such promise began to fail, her body rejecting the medication that had given them hope. The specialist at Boston General delivered the news with clinical detachment. Without a more aggressive and significantly more expensive treatment protocol, her chances of survival were dropping rapidly. The Foundation's representative, a polite but firm woman named M.S. Richardson, explained that their funding had reached its predetermined limit. The new treatment, costing nearly $900,000, fell well outside their scope. Sarah received this news with quiet dignity, but Emily, hiding behind the consultation room door, watched her mother's hands tremble as she signed the refusal of treatment forms. That night, for the first time since her suicide attempt, Sarah broke down completely. Emily found her in Catherine's old room at Crawford Technologies, where she was cleaning, surrounded by knocked-over trash bins, clutching a framed photo she'd found in a desk drawer. The photo showed a younger, happier version of William Crawford with his daughter, the same girl who, unknown to them, had once been Emily's library friend. The rejection from the hospital's board was particularly cruel. Despite Dr. Martinez's passionate advocacy, they refused to proceed with the treatment without advance payment. "We're not in the business of providing charity care," the chief administrator stated during a board meeting, not realizing Emily was curled up beneath a waiting room chair, having sneaked in to plead her mother's case. "If we make an exception for her, where do we draw the line?" News of Sarah's declining health spread through the office building's night shift workers. Her colleagues, other cleaners, security guards, maintenance staff began collecting money among themselves. They could barely afford their own lives, but they gave what they could: crumpled dollar bills, handfuls of coins. Brown bag lunches declined so the money could go to the fund. Their effort raised $127.43, a fortune in their world, but barely enough for one day's worth of Sarah's needed medication. Emily made her own desperate attempts to help. She took on more paper routes, started cleaning houses after school, and even tried selling her belongings at a sidewalk sale that no one attended. Her teachers noticed her falling asleep in class, her homework increasingly incomplete, but their concerns were met with quiet determination. "My mom needs me," was all she would say. The physical toll on Sarah became impossible to ignore. Her night shift supervisor found her passed out beside her cleaning cart one evening, barely conscious and burning with fever. Instead of calling an ambulance, which Sarah had explicitly begged them not to do, knowing she couldn't afford the bills, they called Emily, who left her evening house cleaning job to help her mother home. Local media, which had once vilified Sarah as a thief, now painted her as an object of pity. A local news station ran a feature story from corporate criminal to cleaning crew: the fall of Sarah Anderson. The piece, while seemingly sympathetic, subtly reinforced her guilt, suggesting her current situation was karmic justice for her alleged crimes. Emily smashed their home's only television after watching it. Mrs. Thompson, witnessing the family's desperation, made her own sacrifice. She tried to sell her wedding ring, her last valuable possession, to contribute to Sarah's treatment fund. When the pawn shop owner recognized her as the Anderson supporter, he offered a fraction of its worth, assuming her desperation. The elderly widow's tears of humiliation only added to Emily's growing sense that the world was irredeemably cruel. Sarah, between increasingly frequent hospital visits, began preparing Emily for the inevitable. She wrote letters for future birthdays, collected photos and mementos in carefully labeled boxes, and recorded videos on a borrowed smartphone. Each night she added to a journal filled with advice, recipes, and memories, a guidebook for the life she wouldn't be there to guide her daughter through. Emily pretended not to notice these preparations, but each night she would sneak into her mother's room just to watch her breathe. William Crawford faced the most challenging decision of his life in his mahogany-paneled office, staring at two documents before him. On the left, A contract to sell Crawford Technologies to a multinational corporation, a deal worth billions that would give him the personal funds to save Sarah Anderson. On the right, evidence of his brother's crimes, enough to destroy Robert but potentially tank the company's stock and eliminate any chance of funding Sarah's treatment. Robert had sensed his brother's investigation and moved aggressively to counter it. That morning, he'd called an emergency board meeting, presenting a motion to force William into early retirement, citing emotional instability and erratic business decisions. The board, concerned about recent anonymous donations cutting into profits, seemed receptive. The same members who had once praised William's leadership now avoided his eyes, their loyalty swaying with the promise of profitable change. The potential buyers, Global Tech Solutions, had made their conditions clear. Any scandal or significant management changes before the sale would void their offer. William knew that exposing Robert's crimes would torpedo the deal, but staying silent meant allowing his brother to continue destroying lives. The weight of Sarah's declining health pressed against his conscience, while Catherine's last wish echoed in his mind, "Promise you'll help others, Daddy." His ex-wife Diana, hearing of his dilemma, called from Paris for the first time in years. "You couldn't save our daughter," she reminded him, her voice crackling with static and old pain. "Don't destroy yourself trying to save everyone else." Her words, meant to dissuade him, only strengthened his resolve. He'd failed one daughter, he wouldn't fail another. The company's legal team, sensing trouble, presented him with a gag order regarding Sarah's case. They argued that any admission of wrongdoing in her termination could open the company to massive lawsuits. Think of the shareholders, they urged, as if stock prices outweighed human lives. William thought instead of Emily selling papers in the snow to buy her mother medicine. Robert's threat came next, delivered over an expensive bottle of wine at their mother's house. "If you pursue this," he said quietly, "I'll ensure everyone knows how your grief over Catherine made you miss the signs of corporate theft. Your negligence enabled everything Sarah Anderson did." The lie was crafted to wound, targeting William's deepest guilt about his years of emotional absence. The corporate machine William had built was turning against him. Board members who had attended Catherine's funeral, who had sent flowers and condolences, now whispered about his unhealthy obsession with Sarah's case. They suggested grief counseling, medical leave, anything to remove him from the equation before he could disrupt their profitable status quo. His decision was complicated by the discovery that several board members were unknowingly involved in Robert's schemes. Exposing his brother would likely lead to their arrests as well, destroying families who were genuinely ignorant of the fraud they'd been drawn into. The ripple effects would impact thousands of employees who depended on Crawford Technologies for their livelihoods. In a cruel twist, Sarah's condition had become public enough to affect company stock. Shareholders worried about potential liability if she died, fearing her story might prompt investigations into other terminations. The same people who had condemned her now saw her survival as necessary for their financial interests, but not enough to actually help her. William found himself standing in the hospital parking lot late one night, watching Sarah slowly make her way to her cleaning shift, her body bent with pain but her head still held high. The security cameras caught him nearly approaching her several times, only to turn away, torn between the desperate need to apologize and the knowledge that his help, tainted by years of negligence, might not be welcome. The truth emerged in the most unexpected way. While clearing out Catherine's room, a task he'd postponed for 5 years, William found a worn library card tucked inside her diary. The discovery led him to the Boston Public Library, where an elderly librarian remembered Catherine and her young friend, a little girl named Emily Anderson, who still came to study there. The diary's pages revealed a connection that shattered William's world. Catherine had written extensively about Emily, describing their afternoon conversations among the bookshelves. "She reminds me of me," one entry read, "but she's so much stronger. While I complain about Dad working late, she's working herself to help her mom. I wish Dad could meet her, maybe helping them would help heal his heart too." The final entry, dated the day of the accident, struck him like a physical blow. Meeting Emily at the library today? Mom says Sarah Anderson got fired from Dad's company last week. EM's devastated. There must be some mistake. Dad would never let something like this happen if he knew the truth. I'll talk to him tonight. That conversation never happened. Catherine had died en route to meet Emily, carrying a folder of evidence she'd gathered about Sarah's case. In a cruel twist of fate, Sarah had been the one to help Catherine adjust to her parents' divorce 2 years earlier. During lunch breaks, she'd noticed the teenager sitting alone in the company courtyard and had started sharing her homemade cookies, offering a sympathetic ear. Catherine's diary detailed these moments. Mrs. Anderson understands what it's like when your family falls apart. She says sometimes things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt stronger. The library's security footage from that period showed something remarkable. On days when William had cancelled plans with Catherine due to work, Sarah had stayed late, helping her with calculus homework or simply listening to her dreams of becoming a human rights lawyer. The same woman he'd allowed to be destroyed had been quietly caring for his daughter when he couldn't. Mrs. Thompson, during one of her visits to Emily, recognized Catherine's photo on the mantel. Such a sweet girl, she remarked, unaware of William's connection. She would bring Emily books from her own collection, saying every child deserved a chance to escape into stories. The elderly woman's casual comment revealed years of interconnected kindness that had gone unnoticed. Emily's school essays, which William obtained through the Scholarship Foundation, painted a devastating picture. She'd written about Catherine as her library angel, describing how the older girl had defended her from bullies and taught her to stand up for herself. One essay, written shortly after Catherine's death, reads, "She made me believe that even when the world seems darkest, there are still good people willing to help others. I hope someday I can be that person for someone else." The most heartbreaking connection came from an unmailed letter found in Catherine's desk. Addressed to William, it outlined everything she'd learned about Sarah's case, including conversations she'd overheard in Robert's office. "Dad," she'd written, "I know you're still sad about Mom leaving, but there's another family being torn apart right now. You always taught me that having power means having responsibility. Please help them. Maybe in saving them, we can save ourselves too." The legal battle erupted with the force of a long-dormant volcano when William Crawford walked into the district attorney's office on a cold Monday morning. He carried with him 3 boxes of documents: Catherine's diary, Robert's fraudulent records, and Sarah's original reports. The evidence was damning, but the system that had so quickly condemned Sarah now moved with glacial slowness to correct its mistake. District Attorney Elizabeth Chen, who had personally prosecuted Sarah 3 years ago, looked physically ill as she reviewed the evidence. Her reputation for being tough on white-collar crime had been built partially on Sarah's case. Now she faced the horrifying realization that she'd been manipulated into destroying an innocent woman's life. "This goes beyond simple fraud," she announced, her voice shaking. "This is criminal conspiracy at the highest levels." The corporate machine mobilized instantly against William. Within hours of his DA visit, Crawford Technologies' legal team, led by Robert's hand-picked attorneys, filed for an emergency injunction. They claimed William was having a mental breakdown, citing his grief over Catherine and his obsession with Sarah's case. The same judge who had signed the original search warrant for Sarah's home now had to decide whether to protect or prosecute her accusers. Media vultures descended immediately. "Crawford Empire crumbles, brother vs. brother," screamed the headlines. Business networks ran endless speculation about the company's future. Robert played his part masterfully, appearing on financial news shows to express deep concern for his brother's mental health. The loss of his daughter affected him profoundly, Robert would say, his voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "We only want to help him." Sarah, still working nights as a cleaner, found herself at the center of a storm she didn't fully understand. Reporters ambushed her outside the hospital after her treatments, shoving microphones in her face, demanding comments about William Crawford's crusade. Emily had to be escorted to school by police after journalists started camping outside their apartment, their constant camera flashes turning private pain into public spectacle. The legal proceedings moved like a complex chess game. Each of William's moves to expose the truth was met by corporate counter-moves designed to bury it. Robert's team filed motion after motion, each one designed to delay and obstruct. They questioned the authenticity of Catherine's diary, the legitimacy of the financial records, even the reliability of dying testimony from a grieving father. Support came from unexpected quarters. Agnes, Robert's former secretary, broke decades of silence to testify about documents she'd been forced to shred. Junior analysts, who had watched Sarah's destruction in terrified silence, now stepped forward with saved emails and hidden files. Even the hospital staff who had treated Catherine began sharing stories of Sarah's kindness during the teenager's visits. The turning point came when William's ex-wife Diana flew in from Paris to testify. Her appearance in court silenced the whispers about William's mental state. "My former husband," she declared, her voice steady, "has never been more sane or more himself than he is now. This is the man I married, someone who would risk everything to right a wrong. Our daughter would be proud." The cost was enormous. Crawford Technologies' stock plummeted as more evidence emerged. Long-term clients began distancing themselves from the company. Board members resigned rather than face potential indictment. The charitable foundation William had created to help Sarah now faced scrutiny, with Robert's team arguing it was proof of manipulation rather than restitution. But the most painful battles happened outside the courtroom. Emily, trying to protect her weakening mother from stress, took on the role of family spokesperson. The sight of a 9-year-old girl standing on courthouse steps, calmly answering hostile questions about her mother's character, moved even the most hardened reporters. "My mom taught me that truth always comes out," she would say, her small voice carrying an adult's wisdom. Sometimes it just needs help to find its way. As the legal battle raged in the courts, profound changes were taking place in the lives of everyone involved. William Crawford, once known for his imposing corporate presence, underwent the most visible transformation. He sold his Beacon Hill mansion, moved into a modest apartment near the courthouse, and began personally attending Sarah's medical appointments, though always maintaining a respectful distance. The once powerful CEO started carrying a worn copy of Catherine's diary everywhere, reading it during court recesses. People who had known him for decades barely recognized the man who now spoke softly but firmly about corporate responsibility and human dignity. His former board members watched in disbelief as he liquidated his personal assets to fund both the legal battle and Sarah's continuing treatment, saying simply, "Some things matter more than money." Sarah's transformation was more subtle but equally profound. As evidence of her innocence mounted, her spine straightened, her voice grew stronger. She began keeping a journal of her own, documenting everything for Emily's future. "I want her to know," she wrote, "that sometimes justice comes late, but it comes during her chemotherapy sessions." She started counseling other patients, her own struggle giving her words deep authenticity. Emily, thrust into a spotlight she never wanted, evolved from a scared little girl into a poised young advocate. Her school presentations about truth and justice moved teachers to tears. She started a support group for children of sick parents, turning her pain into purpose. The local paper, which had once published cruel speculation about her mother, now ran a feature calling her Boston's youngest warrior for justice. Robert Crawford's transformation took a darker turn. As his carefully constructed world crumbled, his polished exterior cracked. During depositions, his hands shook uncontrollably. Staff reported him shredding documents at 3 a.m., muttering about betrayal. The man who had orchestrated Sarah's downfall now jumped at shadows, seeing accusers around every corner. His wife filed for divorce, taking their children to her parents' home in Connecticut. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who had stood by the Andersons, found her own life changing. Other neighbors, ashamed of their previous behavior, began helping her with groceries and home repairs. She became a symbol of loyalty in the community, Her small acts of kindness during the Andersons' darkest days now held up as an example of true friendship. Diana Crawford, William's ex-wife, found herself drawn back into a life she had fled. The woman who had escaped to Paris to avoid memories of Catherine now spent hours with Emily, seeing in the child echoes of her own daughter's compassion. She postponed her return to France indefinitely, renting an apartment near the hospital where Sarah received treatment. The hospital staff who had once treated Sarah with cold professionalism underwent their own evolution. Dr. Martinez, who had fought for her care, established a foundation to help patients caught in similar situations. Nurses who had witnessed her dignity in suffering became her fierce advocates. The hospital administrator who had denied her care was forced to resign after public outcry. William's legal team, initially skeptical of risking their careers on this case, became passionate crusaders. They worked around the clock, many refusing payment, saying this case reminded them why they became lawyers. The youngest associate, fresh from law school, told reporters, "Some cases change the law, this one is changing us." The most remarkable transformation occurred in the relationship between William and Emily. Though they rarely spoke directly, their courthouse encounters held a deep understanding. He would nod respectfully when passing her in the hallway. She would leave small drawings on his legal pad, simple sketches of butterflies and suns, symbols of hope from a child who had every reason to despair. Their silent communication spoke volumes about forgiveness and redemption. The web of connections between the Andersons and Crawfords grew more intricate as the case progressed. Former Crawford Technologies employees began organizing nightly vigils outside Sarah's apartment, their candles forming a protective circle of light. Many were faces she remembered from her analyst days, people who had once turned away in shame or fear. Now they came forward with casseroles, childcare offers, and tearful apologies. Diana Crawford discovered that Sarah had kept every drawing Catherine had ever given her, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve inside her cleaning cart. The two women spent an evening going through them together, their shared grief over Catherine creating a bridge neither had expected. When Sarah's strength failed during chemo sessions, it was Diana who sat with her, reading passages from Catherine's diary that mentioned their library meetings. Emily found an unexpected ally in William's personal assistant, Margaret, who had known Catherine since she was a toddler. The older woman recognized Catherine's mannerisms in Emily's determined chin tilt and unflinching honesty. She began leaving books on Emily's regular library seat, the same classics Catherine had loved, each with a small note of encouragement tucked inside. Their shared love of literature created a safe space amid the chaos. The hospital became a surprising nexus of connection. Dr. Martinez discovered that his own daughter had been one of the students Sarah had tutored during her lunch breaks at Crawford Technologies. Other hospital staff came forward with similar stories. Sarah had helped their children with math homework, advised them on college applications, offered comfort during family crises. These personal testimonies transformed the hospital's institutional stance, leading to a complete review of their charity care policies. Mrs. Thompson's small apartment became an unofficial headquarters for what the media dubbed the Anderson Alliance. Neighbors who had once shunned them now crowded her living room, organizing fundraisers and support schedules. The elderly widow's conviction in Sarah's innocence had never wavered, and her quiet dignity shamed many into reconsidering their earlier judgments. William found himself drawn to these gatherings, though he never entered. He would park across the street, watching the warm light spill from Mrs. Thompson's windows, seeing shadows of community being rebuilt. It reminded him of Catherine's last school report, found in her diary. True justice isn't just about courts and laws, it's about restoring broken connections. The courthouse staff, witnesses to the daily drama, became invested in their own ways. The security guard who had watched Emily do homework in the hallway started bringing extra sandwiches from home. The stenographer offered her weekend tutoring services. The janitor, an immigrant who barely spoke English, left origami cranes on Emily's usual bench, a symbol of hope and healing from his culture. Local businesses, initially hesitant to be associated with the controversy, began taking sides. The coffee shop where Sarah had worked as a barista during college put up a tip jar for her treatment fund. The bookstore where Catherine and Emily had spent countless hours created a scholarship program in their names. Even the newspaper that had once vilified Sarah ran a series of retractions, their editor publicly apologizing for their rush to judgment. Professional connections transformed into deeply personal ones. William's lawyers became regular visitors at the hospital, their children joining Emily's support group for kids with sick parents. The district attorney's office, seeking to make amends, assigned their victim advocate to help Emily navigate media attention. The courthouse became less a place of judgment and more a community center for healing. Perhaps the most profound connection grew between William and Sarah themselves, though they rarely spoke directly. He made sure her favorite flowers, lilies, as mentioned in Catherine's diary, appeared in her hospital room. She left thank you notes in perfectly formatted financial statements, a reminder of her unbroken professional dignity. Their shared love for Catherine and Emily created an unspoken bond, stronger than any corporate hierarchy. The confrontation that would change everything happened during a rainy shareholders' meeting at Crawford Technologies headquarters. William had called for an emergency session, and the boardroom was packed with tense executives, angry investors, and a carefully selected group of witnesses. Robert sat at the far end of the mahogany table, his usual confident smirk replaced by barely concealed anxiety. "Before we begin," William announced, standing at the head of the table, "I'd like to introduce some special guests." The double doors opened, and in walked Sarah Anderson, supported by Emily and Diana. The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Robert half rose from his chair, his face draining of color. Behind them came Agnes, Robert's former secretary, clutching a thick manila envelope, and Dr. Martinez, carrying Sarah's medical records. William's voice cut through the chaos 3 years ago. A crime was committed in this room. Not by Sarah Anderson, as we were led to believe, but by those entrusted with this company's integrity. He began methodically laying out the evidence: forged documents, manipulated security logs, doctored financial records. With each revelation, Robert's face grew paler, his hands trembling as he reached for his water glass. The turning point came when Agnes stepped forward. Her voice, though shaking, carried clearly across the stunned silence. "Mr. Robert made me shred the original reports. He said he'd make sure my grandson never got into college if I talked." She placed a USB drive on the table. "But I kept copies. I couldn't live with the guilt anymore." Robert exploded from his chair, his careful facade cracking completely. "You self-righteous bastard," he screamed at William. "You were too busy mourning to run this company. Someone had to make the hard decisions. That little girl's mother was going to ruin everything we built." His gesture toward Emily proved his fatal mistake. Sarah, despite her weakness, stepped forward. "My daughter? You threatened my daughter." The room fell silent at the quiet fury in her voice. "I accepted what you did to me. I cleaned your offices at night without complaint. But you planned to hurt my child." The corporate titan who had destroyed her life seemed to shrink before her maternal rage. The shareholders watched in stunned silence as Robert, cornered by the evidence, began to unravel. He accused William of mental instability, claimed Catherine's death had driven him to paranoid delusions, even suggested Diana was manipulating him for revenge. Each desperate lie was met with documentation proving the opposite. Then Emily, who had been quietly observing, walked to the center of the room. She pulled Catherine's diary from her backpack and began to read. April 15th. "Uncle Robert was so angry today. He told his assistant to take care of the Anderson problem no matter what it took. I have to tell Dad, but he's so sad lately. I'll tell him tomorrow after I meet Emily at the library." The room grew deathly quiet as everyone realized these were Catherine's last written words. Robert lunged for the diary, but William was faster. The brothers grappled briefly, years of resentment and betrayal exploding into physical violence. But It ended as quickly as it began, with Robert restrained by security guards he had personally hired, now loyal to the truth rather than their paycheck. The shareholders' response was immediate and decisive. Calls for Robert's removal echoed through the room. Old allies quickly distanced themselves, corporate loyalty evaporating in the face of undeniable evidence. The board members who had supported Robert's attempts to force William's retirement now sat in shameful silence. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Diana stepped forward, her Parisian elegance a stark contrast to the corporate chaos. "You killed our daughter, Robert," she said quietly. "Not directly, but she died trying to expose your crimes. She died fighting for justice, just like she always wanted. Her words, delivered with devastating calm, transformed the corporate takedown into something far more personal and profound. And in the aftermath of the confrontation, William Crawford faced the most difficult decision of his life. The board had convened an emergency session, offering him two options: accept a massive buyout from Global Tech Solutions that would give him enough money to save Sarah while keeping the scandal quiet, or pursue full legal action against Robert, which would likely bankrupt the company but ensure justice was served. Sarah's condition had deteriorated rapidly during the shareholders' meeting. Dr. Martinez pulled William aside in the boardroom corridor, his expression grave. "She has weeks, maybe days, without the new treatment protocol. The stress of today hasn't helped." The doctor's words echoed in William's mind as he stared at the contract before him. One signature could save her life, but at what cost to justice? Emily found him in Catherine's old office later that night, surrounded by medical bills and legal documents. She walked straight to Catherine's photo on the wall and spoke without turning. "Mum says sometimes doing the right thing hurts more than doing the easy thing." Her small voice carried the weight of someone who had learned this lesson too young. "But she also says the hurt doesn't last forever." The company's employees complicated his decision. Hundreds gathered outside his office, their futures hanging in the balance. Single parents, people with mortgages, workers who had spent decades building careers at Crawford Technologies, all would be affected by his choice. Their anxious faces pressed against him like a physical weight. Diana offered her own perspective during a quiet dinner in his apartment. "When Catherine died," she said, picking at her untouched food, "we had all the money in the world, but it meant nothing. Maybe this time doing the right thing means more than having the right amount." She placed her hand over his, their first intimate contact in years. The choice crystallized when Robert's final act of desperation came to light. His lawyers offered a deal: they would release funds for Sarah's treatment if William agreed to a joint statement claiming the entire investigation had been a misunderstanding. The corporate spin doctors had already prepared press releases painting it as a family disagreement blown out of proportion by grief and misplaced guilt. Sarah, hearing of the offer, asked to meet William privately. Despite her weakened state, she insisted on walking into his office unassisted. "Your daughter," she said, settling carefully into a chair, "once told me that true strength isn't about winning, but about choosing what's worth fighting for. I won't let you compromise her memory to save me." The board grew increasingly desperate as the company's stock continued to plummet. They presented William with reports showing the ripple effects of a bankruptcy: pension funds wiped out, small investors ruined, local businesses dependent on Crawford Technologies forced to close. Each potential consequence felt like a weight around his neck. William spent a night in Catherine's untouched room, reading and rereading her diary. Near dawn, he found an entry he'd missed. "Dad always says money is just a tool, not a purpose. I think he's forgotten that lately. Maybe that's why he seems so lost." The words, written in his daughter's hopeful hand, seemed to reach across time with their simple wisdom. The choice, when he finally made it, came with devastating clarity. At the next board meeting, William declined the buyout offer. Instead, he announced a full investigation into all company practices, beginning with his own failures as CEO. He would sell his personal assets to fund Sarah's treatment, and the company would face whatever consequences truth demanded. Emily was waiting outside the boardroom when he emerged. Without a word, she took his hand and led him to the window. Below, Sarah stood in the morning light, her face turned up toward them. She offered a small wave, and in that gesture William saw the future Catherine had dreamed of, one where doing right mattered more than being right. The legal battle that followed William's decision shook Boston's corporate world to its foundation. As Crawford Technologies stock plunged and investors fled, the city watched in fascination as one of its most powerful families waged war against itself. Robert's legal team launched a scorched earth defense, attacking William's mental state, Sarah's credibility, and even Emily's testimonies. The courthouse became a daily battlefield. Each morning, reporters clustered around the entrance, capturing the parade of witnesses, former employees testifying about Robert's threats, financial experts explaining the complex fraud, and medical professionals documenting Sarah's declining health. The proceedings took on the air of a modern morality play, with the city divided between those who saw William as a hero and those who considered him a traitor to his class. Sarah's testimony proved the emotional center of the trial. Despite her weakened condition, she insisted on walking to the witness stand unassisted. For 6 hours, she detailed the systematic destruction of her life, the false accusations, the blacklisting, the nights cleaning the offices where she'd once been a respected analyst. When Robert's lawyer suggested she had orchestrated the entire situation to gain William's sympathy, she responded with quiet dignity, "Sir, I didn't ask for justice. Justice demanded itself." Emily's turn on the stand changed the trial's tone entirely. The sight of a 9-year-old girl calmly describing how she sold newspapers before dawn to buy her mother's medicine silenced even Robert's most aggressive defenders. When asked why she hadn't sought help earlier, her response haunted the courtroom. "Adults kept telling me this was justice. I thought maybe I just didn't understand what justice meant." Robert's defense crumbled when his own wife took the stand. Elizabeth Crawford, who had initially stood by her husband, revealed years of manipulation and cruelty. She described how Robert had celebrated the night of Sarah's termination, toasting to problems solving themselves. Her testimony about his plans to handle Emily if she became troublesome caused several jurors to openly weep. The media circus reached new heights when Diana testified. The international press descended on Boston to capture the French socialite's return. Instead of the bitter ex-wife they expected, they found a woman transformed by grief into an advocate for justice. Her testimony about Catherine's last days, her friendship with Emily, and her determination to honor her daughter's memory turned public opinion decisively against Robert. William's testimony lasted 3 days. He shouldered his own guilt openly, acknowledging how his grief-stricken neglect had allowed Robert's crimes to flourish. "I failed Sarah Anderson," he admitted. "I failed my daughter. I failed every employee who trusted me to protect them." This trial isn't about redemption, it's about finally doing what's right. The prosecution's final piece of evidence proved devastating. Catherine's complete diary, read aloud in court. Her detailed observations of Robert's schemes, interwoven with her hopes for Emily's future and her father's healing, left no doubt about the truth. The last entry, written hours before her death, became the trial's emotional crescendo. If we don't stand up for people like Emily and her mom, then all our success means nothing. Mrs. Thompson provided the trial's most unexpected testimony. The elderly widow shuffled to the stand and proceeded to demolish Robert's character with devastating precision. She recalled conversations she'd overheard while cleaning his office at night, detailing his plot against Sarah with the clear memory of someone who had waited years to speak truth to power. The verdict, when it came, felt almost anticlimactic. Robert Crawford was found guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering, and criminal threatening. The judge, noting the particular cruelty of his actions toward a sick mother and her child, imposed the maximum sentence. As he was led away in handcuffs, Robert turned to his brother and spat out his final betrayal. She was never worth all this. Catherine would be alive if she hadn't been playing hero. Victory in court came with a devastating price tag. Crawford Technologies, once a titan of Boston's business world, began to crumble. The stock price plummeted to historic lows, triggering a cascade of layoffs that affected thousands of employees. William watched helplessly as the company he'd built over 30 years imploded under the weight of truth. The personal cost proved even more severe. William's reputation in the business community, once sterling, lay in tatters. Former friends and associates crossed the street to avoid him. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. Board positions at other companies disappeared overnight. The same corporate elite who had once sought his advice now whispered that he had betrayed his own class, choosing emotional sentimentality over business pragmatism. The media's attention turned predatory. Reporters dug into every aspect of William's past, searching for other potential scandals. They camped outside his apartment, photographed him visiting Catherine's grave, and speculated endlessly about his relationship with Sarah. Even his most innocent actions were twisted into tabloid fodder, grieving billionaire's guilt-driven crusade and Crawford's costly redemption business empire sacrificed for former employee. Sarah's medical treatment, funded by William's rapidly dwindling personal assets, became another source of public scrutiny. Conservative business publications suggested she had manipulated him, using her illness to extract revenge. The treatments themselves, experimental and expensive, drew criticism from those who felt the money could have saved more jobs at Crawford Technologies. The company's collapse affected the entire city. Small businesses that had depended on Crawford Technologies employees saw their customer base vanish. The charitable foundations the company had supported faced sudden funding cuts. Even the local Little League team, sponsored by Crawford Tech for decades, had to scramble for new uniforms. Diana faced her own battles in Paris, where her social circle viewed her support of William's actions as a betrayal of their class. Her fashion boutique lost wealthy clients, and her invitation to elite social events quietly disappeared. She bore these reversals with characteristic grace, telling reporters some things cost more than money to keep silent about. Emily witnessed the destruction of her world for a second time. Classmates whose parents had lost jobs at Crawford Technologies now bullied her with renewed vigor. The scholarship foundation that had supported her education withdrew its funding, citing changing circumstances. Even her beloved library, facing budget cuts after losing Crawford Technologies' annual donation, had to reduce its hours. The most painful blow came from Catherine's maternal grandparents. They publicly denounced William's actions, claiming he had dishonored their granddaughter's memory by destroying the company she would have inherited. Their statement to the press cut deep. Catherine believed in protecting our family legacy. This crusade for an ex-employee has betrayed everything she valued. Mrs. Thompson, witnessing this cascade of consequences, opened her small apartment to both families. The elderly widow served tea in chipped cups, while William and Sarah watched their worlds burn down around them. Sometimes, she observed, setting out cookies on her best plate, you have to lose everything to remember what matters most. William's final sacrifice came when he sold Catherine's childhood home to fund the last round of Sarah's treatments. The house had been his last tangible connection to his daughter's life, every room filled with memories of her growing up. As he walked through it one last time, touching walls that had once echoed with her laughter, he found a note she'd hidden in her favorite reading nook. Dad, remember what you always told me, doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy. That's why so few people do it. Sarah's battle with her principles proved as challenging as her fight against cancer. When the hospital offered her priority treatment in exchange for signing a statement supporting a softer narrative about Crawford Technologies, she refused despite her deteriorating health. I won't let them rewrite the truth, she told Emily, her voice weak but determined. Your father taught you about integrity, and I won't let his last lesson to you be about compromise. The medical staff watched in amazement as she declined interviews that would have paid for her treatment, turned down book deals promising financial security, and rejected reality TV producers wanting to dramatize her story. Each offer came with the same condition, softening her stance against Robert Crawford and minimizing the company's culpability. Each refusal cost her precious time and resources. Emily's sacrifices cut deeper than any child should bear. She gave up her beloved violin lessons to save money, sold her small collection of books to help with groceries, and spent her afternoons helping Mrs. Thompson with chores instead of joining the school's science club. When asked by her teachers about these changes, she would simply say, "Mom taught me that standing up for truth means standing up even when it hurts." The cost to Sarah's dignity was constant. Former colleagues who now worked for other firms would see her at her night cleaning job and quickly look away. She continued to clean offices in the same building where she had once had her own corner office, maintaining her pride even as her body weakened. One night she found her old family photo still in her former desk drawer, a reminder of everything she had lost and everything she refused to compromise. Diana's sacrifice took a different form. She liquidated her successful Paris boutique, using the funds to support both families through the crisis. The French fashion world, her home for 5 years, closed its doors on her. Former friends labeled her a class traitor, and her prestigious Left Bank apartment building suddenly found reasons to non-renew her lease. Yet she remained in Boston, telling William, "Catherine would have wanted us to see this through together." Mrs. Thompson, already living on a tight fixed income, shared everything she had. She divided her Social Security checks between groceries for both families, went without her own medications to help pay for Emily's school supplies, and spent her nights knitting items to sell at local craft fairs. When neighbors questioned her loyalty to the disgraced families, she responded simply, "Sometimes doing right costs everything. That's how you know it's right." The personal toll on William manifested in quiet ways. He started taking public transportation, brown bagging lunches, and living in a modest apartment. Each morning he would pass the building that had once borne his family's name, now rebranded by its new owners. The doormen who had once greeted him with deference now pretended not to recognize him. His entire world had shrunk to the space between the courthouse, the hospital, and his small apartment. Emily's school life became increasingly isolated. Birthday party invitations stopped coming. Soccer teammates suddenly had no room in their carpool. Lunch tables emptied when she approached. The daughter of the woman who had destroyed Crawford Technologies and the man who had betrayed his class found herself in a social no man's land. Yet she held her head high, telling her mother, "Real friends stay even when things are hard." Catherine taught me that. The most poignant sacrifices were the small ones, the daily dignities surrendered in the name of truth. Sarah wearing her old business suits to clean toilets, maintaining her standards even as her body failed. Emily doing homework by candlelight to save on electricity. William selling his late wife's jewelry to pay for Emily's school books. Diana shopping at discount stores while her former clients strutted past in designer clothes she had once selected for them. These quiet sacrifices went largely unnoticed by the world, but they bound the unlikely family together in ways that wealth and status never could. As Mrs. Thompson observed while serving them dinner on mismatched plates, "Sometimes you have to lose the life you planned to find the life you were meant to live." The darkest period came during a bitter Boston winter when everything seemed to falter at once. Sarah's treatments began failing, their effectiveness diminishing even as the costs mounted. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about making her comfortable, words that echoed through hospital corridors like a death knell. Emily overheard these conversations from her usual hiding spot behind the nurse's station, her small hands clutching her mother's worn appointment book. William faced his own demons in the pre-dawn hours, sitting in Catherine's emptied room, surrounded by the ghostly outlines where her furniture had once stood. The house's sale was final, and the new owners wanted him out by month's end. Each night he found himself talking to Catherine's memory, questioning every decision, wondering if the cost of truth had been too high. The silence that answered him grew heavier with each passing night. The isolation reached its peak during the holiday season. The annual Crawford family Christmas party, once a highlight of Boston's social calendar, now proceeded without them. Through the restaurant windows, William and Diana watched their former friends and family celebrate, their exclusion made more painful by the warmth and light they could see but not share. Emily, passing by with her mother's medications, pressed her small hand against the cold glass, leaving a print like a tiny star. Sarah's darkest moment came not from her illness but from a chance encounter in the hospital. A former Crawford Technologies employee, now unemployed due to the company's downsizing, recognized her in the chemotherapy ward. The woman's husband had also lost his job in the collapse, and their insurance had been terminated. "Are you happy now?" she hissed at Sarah. "Was your revenge worth all our family's suffering?" Sarah spent that night vomiting, and not from the chemotherapy. The media's cruelty reached new depths. A prominent business magazine published a scathing article titled "The True Cost of Conscience: How One Man's Moral Crusade Destroyed Thousands of Lives." The piece detailed every job lost, every pension reduced, every small business affected by Crawford Technologies' collapse. They ran it with a split image on one side, Sarah in her analyst days on the other, the empty corporate headquarters with its darkened windows. Emily's school life descended into a special kind of hell. During a history lesson about justice and civil rights, a teacher used Crawford Technologies as a negative example of emotional decision-making overwhelming business necessity. Emily sat through the entire lecture, tears sliding silently down her face, as her classmates stared and whispered. That afternoon she found her locker plastered with printouts of articles about her mother's crimes. Diana hit her low point during a forced visit to Paris to settle her boutique's bankruptcy. Her former friends hosted a fashion show fundraiser for the displaced Crawford Technologies workers, making sure she knew she wasn't welcome. That night, alone in her empty shop, she found herself surrounded by mannequins wearing the last collection she'd never get to show, their blank faces seeming to judge her choices. Mrs. Thompson, their steadfast supporter, faced her own crisis of faith. Her small pension had been partially invested in Crawford Technologies stock, and the collapse had halved her monthly income. One particularly cold night, unable to afford both heat and her heart medication, she sat in her darkened apartment wearing 3 sweaters, questioning whether her loyalty had been wise. The next morning she still shared her last tea bags with Sarah and Emily. Even the city itself seemed to turn against them. Charitable foundations that had once competed for William's patronage now returned his personal donations. Community organizations removed Sarah from their volunteer lists. The library where Catherine and Emily had first met posted signs prohibiting non-patrons from using their facilities, a direct response to Emily doing her homework there to save on electricity. In these darkest moments, their only comfort came from each other. They gathered in Mrs. Thompson's small apartment, sharing meager meals and precious warmth, finding strength in their shared commitment to truth. As Emily noted in her diary, echoing words Catherine had once written, "Maybe the darkness is so deep because we're getting closer to the light." The tide began to turn on a snowy Tuesday morning when Agnes, Robert's former secretary, suffered a stroke. As she lay in the hospital, she insisted on speaking to William, her words slurred but urgent. Her grandson, now a junior analyst at a competing firm, brought her a small safety deposit box key. "I kept everything," she whispered. "Catherine knew. She helped me hide it all." The safety deposit box contained a treasure trove of evidence, original documents, unauthorized wire transfer records, and most damaging of all, Robert's personal journal. But the true revelation came from a series of emails between Catherine and Agnes, showing that William's daughter had been building her own case against her uncle for months before her death. She had discovered the fraud independently and had been working with Agnes to gather evidence, planning to present it to her father on the day she died. The emails revealed something even more startling. Catherine had been secretly recording Robert's conversations using a device disguised as a decorative pin, a birthday gift from him, ironically. The recordings, stored on multiple USB drives, captured years of incriminating conversations. Robert's casual discussions of fraud, threats against Sarah, and plans to manipulate his grieving brother were all preserved in his own voice. William's hands trembled as he listened to his daughter's voice introducing each recording. "Dad, if you're hearing this, something's happened to me. But you taught me that truth matters more than anything. I couldn't stand by and watch Uncle Robert hurt more people like Emily's mom." The timestamps showed that her last recording was made hours before her fatal accident. A deeper investigation revealed that Robert had discovered Catherine's investigation the day before her death. Security footage from Crawford Technologies, long thought lost, showed an explosive confrontation between uncle and niece in his office. Catherine's last words to him were captured clearly: "I'm telling Dad everything tomorrow. You can't buy silence when it costs people their lives." The evidence extended beyond Robert's crimes. Hidden in Catherine's school locker, untouched for 5 years, her personal journal contained detailed observations of Sarah's kindness during her parents' divorce. "Mrs. Anderson stays late to help me with Calculus 1 entry read. She doesn't know I hear her crying in the bathroom after, worrying about making rent, but she still helps me even when she's hurting." Emily, accompanying William to clear out Catherine's locker, found something else: a carefully wrapped birthday present intended for her. Inside was a first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird, with an inscription for Emily, because standing up for truth is always worth it, even when it costs everything. "Your library friend, Catherine." The date showed Catherine had bought it the day before she died. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Robert's wife, Elizabeth, found a hidden safe in their vacation home containing detailed plans to cause Sarah's accident if she ever came too close to exposing the truth. The documents included payments to private investigators to track both Sarah and Emily, along with contingency plans for their removal if necessary. Agnes's grandson, inspired by Catherine's courage, began his own investigation at his firm. He discovered that Robert's fraud extended far beyond Crawford Technologies, implicating several major players in Boston's financial sector. The young analyst worked nights and weekends, building on Catherine's original research, eventually uncovering a network of corruption that had protected Robert for years. Catherine's final piece of evidence, found in a false bottom of her jewelry box, was a letter to Emily that she never got to deliver. "Dear Emily," it read, "I know things are hard right now, but I've seen how brave you are, how you keep fighting even when everyone else gives up. I'm fighting too, in my own way. Maybe someday we can fight together. Until then, keep believing in truth. It's the most powerful thing we have." The city's awakening to the truth came like a tidal wave. The Boston Globe ran a front page exposed titled "The True Heroes of Crawford Technologies: A Daughter's Sacrifice, A Father's Redemption." The story, featuring Catherine's photographs alongside Emily's, drew parallels between two girls who chose truth over comfort, justice over security. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Former employees who had blamed Sarah for their job losses now held candlelight vigils outside her hospital room. They carried signs reading, "We're sorry and truth matters more than money." Many shared their own stories of Robert's intimidation, creating a tapestry of testimony that validated Catherine's findings. The sight of hundreds of candles illuminating the hospital windows became a nightly reminder of community redemption. The professional rehabilitation began with the Massachusetts Bar Association launching a formal review of Sarah's case. Legal experts who had once condemned her now praised her integrity. The state's top law firms, recognizing the precedent-setting nature of the case, offered pro bono services to help restore her professional licenses and clear her name. The same courts that had rushed to judgment now worked overtime to expedite her exoneration. Boston's business community underwent its own transformation. Companies that had blacklisted Sarah started receiving pressure from their boards to make amends. Job offers poured in, each more generous than the last, though Sarah was too ill to consider them. The Boston Business Council, which had revoked her membership, now created an annual ethics award in her name, with Emily invited to present the inaugural honor. The media's mea culpa was particularly striking. Journalists who had vilified Sarah now wrote glowing profiles of her dignity under pressure. Television stations that had portrayed William as a business traitor now hailed him as a corporate reformer. A Pulitzer-winning reporter spent months documenting Catherine's investigation, producing a powerful series titled The Price of Truth: How a Teenager's Courage Changed Corporate America. Local institutions rushed to make amends. The private school that had pressured Emily to leave now offered her a full scholarship through graduation. The library created a special reading room in Catherine's name, featuring books about justice and corporate responsibility. Even the country clubs that had revoked William's membership now quietly reached out, their invitations met with polite declinations. The hospital administration underwent a complete overhaul. Dr. Martinez was promoted to Chief of Oncology, with a mandate to create a program for patients facing financial hardships. The same administrator who had tried to discharge Sarah now found himself explaining his actions to the board of directors. The hospital's charity care policy was rewritten, with input from patient advocates and ethics specialists. Emily's classmates, many children of former Crawford Technologies employees, began to see her differently. The truth about their parents' job losses, that Robert's fraud, not Sarah's honesty, had caused the company's collapse, changed their perspective. Soon Emily found herself surrounded by supporters, though she never forgot who her true friends had been during the darker days. The most profound recognition came from Boston's legal community. The district attorney's office, acknowledging their rush to judgment in Sarah's original case, established new protocols for corporate fraud investigations. The judge who had signed the original search warrant for Sarah's home now taught ethics seminars, using the case as a cautionary tale about the importance of due diligence. Diana's vindication came in the form of international recognition. French media, initially hostile, now portrayed her as a modern-day hero, sacrificing privilege for principle. Fashion magazines that had blacklisted her now featured profiles celebrating her integrity. Her former boutique space was transformed into a non-profit center for corporate ethics education, funded by recovering Crawford Technologies shareholders. The healing began in quiet moments, away from public recognition and media attention. It started one evening in Sarah's hospital room, where William finally found the courage to sit beside her bed. Without words, he reached for her hand, the same hand that had once comforted his daughter during her parents' divorce. Sarah's grip, though weakened by illness, held the strength of understanding. Diana and Emily forged their own connection through Catherine's memory. They spent afternoons in the hospital garden, Diana sharing stories of Catherine's childhood while Emily told tales of their library friendship. Together, they created a memorial garden outside the hospital, planting Catherine's favorite flowers, bright yellow daffodils that would bloom each spring, a symbol of hope and renewal. Mrs. Thompson's small apartment became the heart of their healing. Sunday dinners became a tradition, with Diana cooking French recipes, William bringing dessert from the local bakery, and Emily reading aloud from Catherine's diary. These gatherings, humble in their simplicity, held more warmth than any Crawford family function had ever managed. Sarah attended when her strength allowed, propped up on Mrs. Thompson's faded couch, her presence a quiet reminder of why truth mattered. The former Crawford Technologies employees found their way to forgiveness through action. They created a support network, helping each other find new jobs, sharing resources, and rebuilding their community. Many discovered that the company's collapse had freed them to pursue long-delayed dreams. They began including Sarah and Emily in their gatherings, understanding now that truth-tellers protect rather than destroy communities. William and Diana's relationship transformed into something neither expected, not a rekindling of romance, but a deep friendship forged in shared grief and redemption. They could finally speak of Catherine without pain overwhelming them, finding comfort in how their daughter's courage had changed so many lives. Their weekly visits to her grave became moments of peace rather than sorrow. Emily's reconciliation with her peers happened gradually. The same classmates who had shunned her now sought her help with ethical dilemmas, valuing her hard-won wisdom. She started a school club focused on corporate responsibility, naming it Catherine's Legacy. The meetings, held in the library where she and Catherine had first met, drew students eager to understand how small choices shape larger truths. The hospital staff, from janitors to specialists, became part of their extended family. Dr. Martinez brought his children to Emily's birthday party. Nurses stopped by Mrs. Thompson's apartment with homemade casseroles. The night shift workers who had helped Sarah during her cleaning days now visited during their breaks, sharing coffee and quiet conversation. Sarah found peace in unexpected ways. Despite her illness, she began mentoring young professionals through a program she created from her hospital bed. Ethics in Action connected experienced whistleblowers with corporate employees facing moral dilemmas. Her wisdom, hard-won through suffering, helped others find the courage to stand for truth. The most profound reconciliation happened between William and himself. In Catherine's diary, he found not condemnation for his past negligence but hope for his future choices. Her words became his guide. "Dad always taught me that it's never too late to do the right thing. Sometimes it just takes a while to figure out what that is." Their unlikely family unit, bound by loss and redeemed by truth, grew stronger with each passing day. They celebrated holidays together, marked milestones, and faced setbacks as one, as Mrs. Thompson observed while watching them share a meal in her modest dining room. "Sometimes the families we choose heal the wounds the families we're born in to create." The resolution came not with a bang, but with a series of quiet victories. Sarah's experimental treatment, funded by the combined efforts of William's remaining assets and community donations, began showing remarkable results. Her oncologist, Dr. Martinez, called it a medical miracle, but those who knew her understood it was her unwavering spirit that had kept her fighting. The legal system finally delivered its complete vindication. In a special hearing, the judge not only cleared Sarah's name but also issued a formal apology from the bench. "The court failed you," she declared, her voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. "Your steadfast dignity in the face of injustice has taught us all a valuable lesson." The record was sealed, her professional licenses restored, and her reputation fully rehabilitated. Robert's sentencing brought its own form of closure. Standing in the same courtroom where he had once testified against Sarah, he faced the consequences of his actions. The judge, noting the calculated cruelty of his crimes, handed down the maximum sentence. As he was led away, Robert caught sight of Catherine's photograph on the evidence table, his niece's smile a final reminder of the truth he had tried to bury. Crawford Technologies emerged from its ashes in an unexpected way. A group of former employees, led by Agnes's grandson, purchased the company's remaining assets. They rebuilt it as a worker-owned cooperative, with ethics and transparency at its core. The first board meeting was held in the library, where Catherine and Emily had once shared their dreams of justice. William found his new purpose in establishing the Catherine Crawford Foundation for Corporate Ethics. The foundation, housed in his daughter's former reading room at the library, provided support for whistleblowers and their families. Sarah, growing stronger each day, became its first executive director, working from a modified office in her home as she continued her recovery. Emily's academic achievements earned her a full scholarship to Catherine's dream school. During her acceptance speech, she spoke about the power of truth and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. The audience, including many former Crawford Technologies employees and their children, gave her a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Mrs. Thompson's small apartment, which had sheltered them through their darkest days, became a regular gathering place for their expanded family. Sunday dinners continued, now filled with laughter and hope rather than worry and fear. The elderly widow would sit at the head of her table, surveying the unlikely family she had helped forge, her faith in human goodness fully restored. Would you like me to continue with Section 9.b New Beginnings? Copyright 9 billion, Viet Thanh Doan Van, Yuko viet du so tu da dua ra. Dua ra so tu kan vietit it 9.b. New beginnings 500 words. Spring brought new beginnings along with the daffodils in Catherine's memorial garden. Sarah, now in remission, took tentative steps back into the professional world as a guest lecturer at Boston University's Business Ethics program. Her first lecture, titled The Price and Value of Truth, drew students from across the campus. Among them sat William and Emily, their hearts swelling with pride as Sarah shared their story with a new generation. The Catherine Crawford Foundation flourished under its unique partnership. William provided the business expertise, while Sarah brought the hard-earned wisdom of experience. Together, they created programs that went beyond mere whistleblower protection, focusing on cultivating ethical corporate cultures from the ground up. Their first initiative, a scholarship program for children of whistleblowers, named Emily as its inaugural recipient. Diana made Boston her permanent home, converting her fashion expertise into a social enterprise. She launched Second Chances, a boutique that provided professional wardrobes and interview coaching to women rebuilding their careers after corporate retaliation. Sarah's story had inspired her to help others reclaim their professional dignity along with their truth. Emily's transformation continued to inspire her peers. Her school club, Catherine's Legacy, expanded to other schools across Boston. She organized ethics debates, mentored younger students, and shared her story with a wisdom beyond her years. The library where she and Catherine had first met became the headquarters for their youth leadership programs. Mrs. Thompson's apartment building underwent its own transformation. The foundation purchased it, renovating the units while ensuring long-term residents like Mrs. Thompson could stay at their current rents. The building's community room was renamed Thompson Hall, becoming a meeting space for ethics workshops and support groups. The reformed Crawford Technologies, under its new cooperative ownership, established itself as a model of corporate responsibility. They created an annual ethics award in Catherine's name, with Sarah and William serving as honorary judges. The company's new mission statement, displayed prominently in their lobby, read, "Truth is our most valuable asset." William found unexpected joy in teaching business ethics at local colleges. His classes, combining practical experience with moral philosophy, became some of the most popular on campus. Students were drawn to his unique perspective as someone who had seen both sides of corporate power and chosen truth over profit. The most meaningful new beginning came in the quiet moments. Sunday dinners at Mrs. Thompson's expanded to include former employees, new friends, and fellow whistleblowers. The modest apartment that had once sheltered them in crisis now witnessed their triumph, filled with laughter, hope, and the warmth of chosen family. Sarah's health continued to improve, allowing her to take daily walks in Catherine's garden. Often she would find Emily there, doing homework on the same bench where Catherine had once sat. These moments of peaceful connection, mother and daughter surrounded by blooming flowers and butterflies, became their daily reminder that truth, though costly, brings its own rewards. The story of the Andersons and Crawfords became more than a tale of corporate scandal and redemption. It evolved into a lesson about the transformative power of truth and the unexpected ways healing can occur. Their journey proved that justice, though sometimes delayed, arrives in its own time, carried forward by the courage of those who refuse to surrender their integrity. Emily captured this essence in her college application essay. Years later, truth isn't just about facts and evidence. It's about the courage to stand firm when everything around you crumbles. My mother taught me that dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. Catherine showed me that one person's courage can change countless lives, and William proved that it's never too late to choose right over easy. Sarah's recovery became a symbol of resilience in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Her regular speaking engagements at business schools across the country carried a simple but powerful message: the cost of truth may seem too high in the moment, but the cost of silence compounds interest on your soul forever. Students would sit spellbound as she described cleaning the offices where she had once been an executive, maintaining her dignity even when all seemed lost. The Catherine Crawford Foundation's annual report included a quote from Catherine's diary that became their guiding principle: "The measure of justice isn't in victories won or battles fought, but in the lives touched and the changes made." Sometimes the smallest act of courage creates ripples that change the entire ocean. These words, written by a teenager who saw injustice and refused to look away, continue to inspire new generations of truth-tellers. William's transformation from corporate titan to ethical guardian offered its own lesson. His journey from grief-stricken father to champion of justice demonstrated that redemption comes not from grand gestures but from daily choices to stand for what's right. As he often told his students, success isn't measured by what you gain, but by what you refuse to lose: your integrity, your compassion, your courage to stand for truth. The unlikely family they formed, brought together by loss, united by truth, and strengthened by love, became living proof that healing comes in unexpected ways. Their Sunday dinners at Mrs. Thompson's apartment, now a tradition spanning years, remained a testament to the family we choose and the bonds forged in adversity. In the end, the story's most profound message lay in its simplicity: truth, though costly, brings its own rewards. The garden where Emily and Catherine once shared dreams, where Sarah found healing, and where William discovered purpose, bloomed each spring with daffodils, bright yellow witnesses to the enduring power of courage, truth, and the unexpected ways love finds to heal what life breaks. Dear viewers, I hope this powerful story of truth, sacrifice, and redemption has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched mine. The journey of Emily, Sarah, William, and Catherine shows us how courage and integrity can triumph even in the darkest times. What resonated most with you? Was it Sarah's unwavering dignity, Emily's remarkable strength, William's path to redemption, or Catherine's lasting legacy? Perhaps it was the beautiful message about how truth, though costly, brings its own rewards. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in their situation? How has their story influenced your perspective on standing up for what's right? Your insights and reflections mean a lot to this community. Let's discuss this compelling story together.